Overchasing is one of the fastest ways to lower your value in front of a man because it shifts the natural balance of effort and attraction. When you're the one constantly reaching out, always planning, always checking in, always trying to make things happen, you take away the space for him to pursue you. Attraction grows in the space between two people, not when one person is carrying all the weight. The harder you chase, the easier it is for him to lean back, relax, and take you for granted. Over time, this dynamic sends a message that you're more invested than he is, and that imbalance is where respect starts to fade. Think about what happens when someone gives you something you didn't earn. It doesn't matter if it's attention, affection, or time. If it comes too easy, you don't value it as much. That's human nature. The same rule applies in relationships. If you're showing up at 100, while he's at a 20, he's not going to suddenly sprint to meet you in the middle. Instead, he's likely to sit back, let you do all the running, and enjoy the benefits without putting in the effort. The problem is, the more you chase, the more he learns he doesn't have to. Overchasing also strips away your natural confidence. Every unanswered text, every delayed callback, every lukewarm response starts to feel like a test. Instead of asking yourself, do I even want this person? You get stuck asking, what else can I do to make them want me? That switch in mindset pulls you out of your worth and into desperation. When you're desperate for someone's attention, you start accepting behavior that doesn't align with what you truly deserve. You'll tolerate slow replies, canceled plans, vague promises, all because you're hoping your persistence will eventually pay off. But in reality, persistence in this case doesn't create respect. It creates comfort for him and exhaustion for you. Another problem with overchasing is how it blurs the line between genuine interest and people-pleasing. There's nothing wrong with showing interest. There's nothing wrong with being excited about someone you like. The issue is when your actions shift from expressing interest to proving your value. Constant texts, rearranging your schedule, dropping your priorities, making excuses for his behavior, those aren't signs of healthy interest. They're signs you're auditioning for a role he hasn't even asked you to play. Men pick up on that energy quickly. And when they sense someone is trying too hard to be chosen, the value of that person in their eyes drops. Overchasing doesn't just hurt how he sees you, it hurts how you see yourself. The more you put someone on a pedestal, the smaller you feel standing next to them. You begin to question if you're enough. You start comparing yourself to other women, analyzing his social media, overthinking every little thing he says or doesn't say. Instead of being grounded in your own worth, you're floating in a constant state of anxiety, waiting for him to decide how much you matter. That kind of energy doesn't just kill attraction, it drains your emotional health. When you find yourself doing the chasing, it's worth asking why. Is it because you don't trust someone will step up on their own? Is it because you've been conditioned to believe effort equals love? Or is it because somewhere deep down you're afraid of losing someone who hasn't even shown you they're worth keeping? The truth is, a healthy connection doesn't require one person to constantly prove themselves. It requires balance. It requires mutual effort. It requires a rhythm where both people lean in, not one person sprinting while the other strolls behind. The subtle danger of overchasing is that it creates a dynamic you can't maintain long term. Even if it works in the beginning, even if your energy and persistence grab his attention, eventually the exhaustion will catch up with you. You can't keep pouring from an empty cup. And when that moment comes, when you finally stop overextending, you'll realize he never built the habit of meeting you halfway. He never learned to pursue you because you never gave him the chance. Ignoring your boundaries is one of the clearest ways to communicate that your words, feelings, and standards don't carry weight. Boundaries aren't just rules you set for someone else. They are reflections of how much you value yourself. When you say you're not okay with something, but then allow it anyway, you teach a man that your no is negotiable. Over time, that creates a dynamic where he doesn't take your limits seriously because you've shown him that you don't enforce them. It's not about being controlling, it's about being consistent with what you expect and what you're willing to tolerate. Boundaries exist to protect your peace, your time, and your self-respect. When you ignore them, you slowly chip away at all three. Maybe it's letting him cancel on you repeatedly without saying anything. Maybe it's allowing disrespectful comments to slide because you don't want to seem difficult. Maybe it's ignoring the gut feeling that something doesn't sit right with you because you'd rather keep the connection alive than risk losing it. Every time you push your own line further back, you send the message that you're willing to bend as long as he stays. That kind of flexibility doesn't come across as easygoing. It comes across as a lack of self-worth. The danger with ignoring boundaries is that it never stops at just one compromise. Once a man sees that you let something slide, it becomes easier for him to test the next limit. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just human nature to see how far we can go when there are no consequences. But whether intentional or not, it creates a slippery slope. Today, it's a late reply you accept without question. Tomorrow, it's plans being changed at the last minute. Eventually, it's deeper things: lack of commitment, lack of effort, lack of respect. And because you've already shown that your boundaries aren't firm, it becomes harder to suddenly draw the line later. Ignoring your boundaries also creates resentment within yourself. You might tell yourself you're fine, that it's not worth making a scene, that it's better to keep the peace. But internally, it builds frustration. You start feeling like you're being taken advantage of, even though you're the one allowing it. That frustration leaks into the way you communicate, the way you show up, and the way you feel about the relationship. It's hard to be fully present and authentic with someone when a part of you is silently angry that your needs are being ignored. And that anger isn't really directed at him. It's directed at yourself for not standing firm. Another cost of ignoring boundaries is how it changes the way you see yourself. Every time you lower your standards, you send yourself the message that what you want doesn't matter. Over time, that chips away at your confidence. You might start believing you're asking for too much when in reality, you're asking for the bare minimum of respect. You might start thinking you need to be more accommodating, more patient, more understanding, when what you really need is to hold your line. The more you sacrifice your boundaries, the harder it becomes to recognize your own value. Men pay attention to how women hold their ground. It's not about being demanding or rigid. It's about showing that you respect yourself enough to expect respect in return. When a man sees that your boundaries are clear and consistent, he either rises to meet them or shows you quickly that he won't. Both outcomes serve you. But when you ignore your boundaries, you rob yourself of that clarity. Instead, you leave things open-ended, hoping he will naturally figure it out. That rarely happens. Most men will follow the lead you set, and if the lead you set is flexibility at the cost of your own needs, then that's the pattern that gets established. Ignoring boundaries also changes the energy in the relationship. Instead of feeling like two equals choosing each other, it becomes a dynamic where one person is in charge and the other is adapting. That imbalance creates tension, even if it's not spoken out loud. You feel it when you hesitate to say how you really feel. You feel it when you second-guess yourself before addressing an issue. You feel it when you bite your tongue instead of speaking up. That energy communicates more than words ever could, and it often tells a man that you're willing to shrink yourself to keep him comfortable. Constantly seeking validation from a man slowly erodes the foundation of your value because it shifts your sense of worth from within yourself to how he responds to you. When every compliment, every text, every ounce of reassurance becomes the measure of your confidence, you place him in control of how you feel about yourself. That dynamic doesn't just drain you, it also creates pressure on him. Instead of enjoying natural connection, he feels like he has to constantly feed your sense of security, and over time, that becomes exhausting. Attraction fades when one person feels more like a lifeline than a partner. Validation in itself is not the problem. Everyone likes to feel noticed, appreciated, and cared for. The issue is when you need it so often that it becomes the fuel for your self-esteem. If he doesn't call, you feel unworthy. If he doesn't compliment you, you start to wonder if he's lost interest. If he doesn't post you online, you spiral into insecurity. That cycle makes your emotional stability dependent on his behavior, and it takes away your ability to stand confidently on your own. A man can sense that imbalance quickly. He sees that instead of enjoying his attention as a bonus, you're relying on it as a requirement. When you constantly look to a man for validation, you send the message that your own approval isn't enough. You might dress a certain way, laugh at things you don't find funny, agree with opinions you don't share, all because you're hoping to earn his approval. On the surface, this may look like connection, but beneath it, it communicates that you don't fully trust your own voice. That lack of self-trust lowers your value in his eyes because part of what makes someone attractive is the confidence they carry in who they are without needing constant confirmation. This constant seeking also shifts the energy of the relationship into imbalance. Instead of a natural flow where both people give and receive, it becomes a dynamic where he holds the power to reassure and you wait for it. That dynamic doesn't inspire respect. It creates dependency. And dependency doesn't feel like partnership. It feels like responsibility. No one wants to feel like they're walking on eggshells, worried that a missed text or forgotten compliment will send the other person into self-doubt. The bigger cost, though, isn't even about how he sees you. It's about how you start to see yourself. The more you train your mind to believe that his words determine your value, the further you drift from your own sense of identity. You stop recognizing your strengths, your beauty, your uniqueness unless he points it out. And when that happens, you lose the ability to stand solid in who you are, regardless of how someone else responds to you. That's where the danger lies, not in wanting to be affirmed, but in needing it so badly that you forget you were already enough before he showed up. Neglecting self-respect is one of the most damaging things you can do in front of a man because it signals that you are willing to abandon yourself just to keep his attention. Self-respect is not about being proud or stubborn. It is about setting the standard for how you expect to be treated. When you let that slip, you invite behavior that chips away at your value. A man doesn't decide how much you're worth, you do. But the moment you start compromising that worth, he takes his cues from you and adjusts his effort accordingly. Self-respect shows up in small, daily choices. It's in how you allow conversations to unfold, how you respond to disrespect, how you carry yourself when things don't go your way. If you constantly excuse bad behavior, brush off broken promises, or stay quiet when something feels wrong, you're teaching him that you're willing to accept less. Over time, that creates a dynamic where he stops putting in effort, not because he can't, but because he doesn't have to. The standard you set is the standard he follows. When you neglect self-respect, you also start to betray yourself. You feel the sting of being overlooked, dismissed, or undervalued, but you silence that feeling to keep the connection alive. On the outside, it looks like you're fine, but on the inside, resentment builds. That resentment doesn't just stay hidden, it leaks out in the way you speak, the way you react, and the way you carry yourself around him. The more you ignore that inner voice, the louder it becomes until you no longer recognize yourself in the relationship. Neglecting self-respect also makes you appear replaceable. Confidence and standards are what separate one person from the next. They are the traits that make someone stand out in a world full of options. When a man sees that you don't respect yourself enough to demand respect from him, he subconsciously lowers the way he values you. It's not always intentional, but it happens because people naturally mirror the energy you give off. If your energy says, "I'll accept anything," then that is exactly what you'll receive. Another cost of neglecting self-respect is how it shapes your identity outside of the relationship. When you constantly put someone else's needs above your own, you start to lose touch with your independence, your passions, and your confidence. You shrink yourself to fit into his world, and in doing so, you send the message that your world isn't big enough to stand on its own. That loss of self is felt deeply, even if you don't admit it out loud. The truth is, a man respects what you respect. If you stand firm in your values, he has no choice but to rise to them or remove himself. But if you consistently neglect yourself, you remove that choice entirely. You make it easy for him to stay comfortable at your expense, and once that pattern is set, it rarely shifts back in your favor. Settling for less than you want is one of the quietest ways to drain your value because it sends a clear message that your desires and standards are negotiable. When you lower the bar for the sake of keeping someone around, you show that being chosen is more important to you than being fulfilled. A man pays close attention to what you tolerate, and if he sees you settling for less than what you truly want, he learns that he doesn't have to give you more. Instead of being motivated to step up, he becomes comfortable giving the bare minimum. Settling often starts small. Maybe you tell yourself it's fine that he doesn't plan dates because at least he makes time to see you. Maybe you excuse the lack of consistent communication because when you do talk, it feels good. Maybe you convince yourself that the relationship is almost what you want, so you can live with the gaps. But those small compromises add up, and before long you find yourself in a situation where the relationship looks nothing like the one you actually wanted. By then you're so invested that walking away feels harder than staying, even if staying means continuing to accept less. The problem with settling is that it reshapes your expectations of love. Instead of believing you deserve consistency, effort, and respect, you start to normalize inconsistency, laziness, and excuses. The more you normalize it, the more it becomes your standard, and the harder it becomes to even recognize when you're being shortchanged. Over time, you might even convince yourself that what you want is unrealistic, when in reality, you've just grown used to not having it. That adjustment doesn't make you more patient or understanding, it makes you more disconnected from your true needs. Settling for less also affects the way you show up in the relationship. Deep down, you know you're not fully satisfied, so you carry frustration and disappointment beneath the surface. That frustration comes out in subtle ways, snapping at small things, feeling unappreciated, questioning his commitment. But because you've already accepted less, it feels harder to bring up the truth. You fear rocking the boat, so you keep your feelings to yourself, all while quietly resenting the gap between what you want and what you're receiving. That unspoken tension creates distance, and instead of building intimacy, the relationship stalls. The danger of settling is not just about how he sees you, but how you see yourself. Every time you accept less, you reinforce the belief that maybe less is all you deserve. That belief chips away at your confidence, making it harder to stand firm in your worth the next time around. Settling doesn't just lower your value in his eyes, it lowers your value in your own. It teaches you to stop expecting more, to stop asking for more, and to stop believing that more is possible. The longer you live in that space, the more it becomes your normal, even though it was never meant to be. Losing your independence is one of the quickest ways to weaken your value in front of a man because it shifts the balance of the relationship from partnership to dependence. Independence isn't about rejecting closeness or refusing support. It's about holding on to the parts of yourself that make you whole outside of the relationship. When you let go of that, you start to send the message that your entire sense of identity revolves around him, and that pressure changes the way he sees you. Independence is attractive because it shows that you have a life, goals, and passions of your own. It communicates that you are choosing to be with him, not needing to be with him to feel complete. When you lose that, the dynamic turns into one where every decision, every mood, and every plan depends on him. That doesn't inspire deeper love. It creates a weight he eventually feels obligated to carry. Over time, obligation doesn't feel like connection. It feels like responsibility, and responsibility alone is not enough to sustain attraction.